Hi, I'm Harold, and this video, which is in the series of Waiting to Talk with God, focuses on uh, the sources behind uh, my opinions, the impressions I've got, and what I've come to know in order to form these opinions that I have. And not only have they, you know, been a product of my thinking, but I thought I would, over the years, what I've done is take a look at other people in this world that have lived and have experienced life from different perspectives, and just to get an idea of how far off I was or how far in tune with what others have experienced. So um, I wanted to identify some of the sources for you that went in to make up the kind of experiences and the kind of things I'm expressing in this series. So, with that in mind, what I did was um, list several authors that I've read, multiple books they've had. I've also listed here a few of the books that were a little more impressive to me in terms of shaping some of the opinions I had. And then down at the bottom, I talk about the spiritual texts that I've run across. So, having said all that, the authors that are on this list either I decided I'd read them because of what I've heard about some of them, or because the subject matter that they were expressing sort of fell in line with the kind of things that I'd become interested in. On the right side at the top of the screen is a list of novels or books that uh, I've read, and they had meaning. All of them had meaning for me, but a few of them on there really set the tone for my direction and the kind of measurements that I used in terms of viewing this world this that I found myself in. A couple of them I want to point out because they kind of shaped my not only my focus but also the direction in which it was suggested I should head in this journey of mine. The first one at the top, which is I think very critical in my pursuit of life and my what I the journey I was going on, and that's the Jonathan Livingston Seagull book. And that book was given to me when I guess I was in my 20s or somewhere in there. And what it did was, when I read it, was define or describe a journey that Jonathan was on in terms of his exploring his world and determining the abilities that he had been given and his experiences and so forth. And once he began to understand certain things, for instance, seagulls could fly, he wanted to share that with um, his group or his flock and his community that he grew up in. And somehow they were of the old school that seagulls are not supposed to fly. And they refused to listen to anything else that um, they were set in the old ways. And so he decided that if he gave them a demonstration of his abilities, that they would accept him and recognize what was within them. But leaders of his flock did the opposite. They shunned him and eventually forbid him from coming back to the flock. And so he set out on this journey alone, uh, perfecting his skills and abilities to fly. But it was a lonely journey, but he stuck to it. And in the end, uh, at old age, and he discovered that others had been on this journey too and had probably gone through similar experiences as him, and yet their journey was probably lonely, but eventually he realized there's this community of seagulls that he could share his experiences with. So that one impressed me, but it also, and in terms of just the story itself, but it also, I had a connection to something that says uh, this is a blueprint or an outline of what you are going to experience in life. And I took it, even at that young age, not knowing what was ahead, took it as something that was very intriguing and impressive to me. So that became one of the books at the top of my list in terms of starting my journey and experiencing what I've experienced today. The other one is The Ultimate Frontier. And although if you read it, it would sound like a fiction novel and would be just an entertaining reading. But it wasn't fiction. It was actually true in terms of what the contents were. And what it did for me is caused me to all of a sudden have a different perspective of this life that I'd been given and how I could perceive the world in terms of the events that take place in it, and whether they be at the human level, the community level, or the worldwide level. There were certain things in play that was explained in this book and uh, caused me to have a different perspective of what life is about. But it also gave me a measuring stick for being able to understand the events that I would come in contact with from that point on. And so some of the things in there were prophetic, uh, but and didn't turn out to be true. But the idea of the concept of what was described in there to me was eye opening and also caused me to approach life from a different perspective from that point on. Two more I want to mention just in passing. The one is the Clan of the Cave Bear, uh, which was fictional, and it involved a story about the beginning of man uh, in the caveman days and his coming out of the cave and some still in it, but the experience of a little girl that began her journey in life by with tragic consequences to start, but then having to go through this process of finally being at home with herself and knowing what her future was all about. And so what it did for me was just create an image or imagination of that period of time when man first started on this earth and the kind of struggles that were ahead of him or her in terms of this progress that continued even to today. And so I like the story because of the fact that we are comfortable in what our surroundings are now, but I always imagine myself and having to start at that point and then see if I was capable of handling what they handle. Uh, the, the final book I want to point to is Hawaii. And in that book, although it's about the island of Hawaii and how it was populated, but was the important part of it was uh, why it was populated and where the people came from to establish life on in that island. But beneath all that was uh, the fact that there was a battle on the place that they came from, the land they came from, over who controlled the god in that location, and different measurements were used to determine the most powerful god, and one was I think size, the shininess of it, and different things, and so one group of people would have control of the god because theirs was recognized at the time as the biggest one or the right one, that kind of thing. And then uh, another god would be found, another something, and then that represented God to them. And so the other gods got kicked out. And this group that populated Hawaii, their god got kicked out. And, and instead of worshiping the new god, they decided they'd heard about this land far across the ocean and set out to find it and maintain it there. And so this story also, it I can't say whether it's fiction or not, but I guess it was. But it's the description of events that took place to populate Hawaii and establish uh, their God in that place until until the missionaries came to overtake their God. And so that one fascinated me in terms of getting an understanding of the uh, different struggles over time about who and what God really was. So um, that became another book that impressed me. Now, down the bottom here, I mentioned a section called spiritual text, and I separated those, and they were also uh, books and texts that I'd read, separated because they focused on uh, uh, communicating what our Creator wants from us from different perspectives. And the first one I mentioned was the Bible, and and I made a note as one of those books I read, but not front to back. And I had an excuse for not reading the Bible from front to back over the years, and I think it's because all of those Sundays that I spent in my youth uh, going to Sunday school and going to church and listening to the ministers, preachers, deacons, and the Sunday school teachers all quoting from the Bible to the point where I thought I'd heard almost everything story about the Bible and what its intent was. And so even today, when I have biblical discussions, I hear the same stories I heard back then growing up. And so I listed that as one of those things that kind of shaped my thinking, but it did so not by a thorough reading of it or a detailed reading of it, but it did because of the time that was invested during my early years that focused on what the contents of the Bible was. The other ones that I listed here were later introduced to me because of this journey and this search I was on. Buddhism, Stoicism, The Power of Now, Carl Jung, and all of those were interpretations of man and what his purpose here on earth was. And so I really was impressed with all of them, to be honest. It was so revealing to me in terms of uh, what it was that others had experienced and how that experience related to uh, my journey in life. The other one on here, the history of religion, was one that um, I came across early in my life, and it had to do with, again, on this understanding and search for religion or search, search for clarification. It kind of explained on a timeline exactly the progress of religion through the ages to that point and the reasons behind the sudden surface of a new denomination or a new religion or belief system and how the reasons behind how it developed and so forth. And so, again, something very important to me in terms of uh, getting a clearer picture of why religion was one way and what I term spirituality was another one. And in all of them, to me, the common denomination was that man and his interpretation of God's will was the driving factor. And you choose uh, which one you believe yeah, religion you believe based on your identity with the person who defined that religion. And so that was one of the clues I began to see in this journey of mine, that whenever the differences between religion had to do with uh, a specific person or man and so forth that was involved. And I just want to make one more comment on this, and that is I was referring back to the establishment of the Hawaiian island population and the struggle with gods and so forth that were on there. And all of those gods were physical, and I guess from the biblical term, you mean that idols that that were worshipped. Uh, and all of a sudden, we had this religion established that was not an island, an idol, but a concept of uh, a being, a creator who couldn't be seen, but you had to trust that he was communicating with us. But you couldn't touch him, so therefore you couldn't overthrow him. And that was a concept that I ran across that stuck with me also. Now, before I go on, I think I want to cut the video here because I don't want it to be too long, but I got a little bit more I need to cover. So I'll stop here and then pick it up in the next video. Thanks.